always been Elspeth Conquer's death in these decks because when you get to blink in Elspeth Conquer's death with the front half of Yorion, you get to exile something, and then you get to blink it, exile something again, and then if your Yorion ever dies in the meanwhile, or you cast your own Shatter to the Sky or something, you get to bring it back and then blink everything again, and it's about those repeat blinks for sure.
We're watching something a little bit different this round. We have world champion Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa playing Team Reclamation against George Carr on Sultai ramp. Sultai we see a little bit less than Bant ramp, but this is a deck that did put up a top 8 last weekend, and this is a deck that's trying to gun for the Team Reclamation strategy, as I understand it.
Yeah, for sure. This Sultai deck, I've heard people kind of joke that it doesn't really beat anything. So I'm curious to see what Paulo was able to, or sorry, what George Carr was able to find out with it. You know.
And you see that main deck Thought Distortion in the hand. Been seeing a couple of copies of those. Those are kind of the idea. That's one of the ways you can try to go over the top of the other Growth Spiral decks, try to stop them from playing. Players just kind of hitting land drops in the early game. See Paulo hanging out with a Growth Spiral in hand, and it's going to be Uro, the first ramp effect on Carr's side.
Yeah, and this matchup is all about who can produce the most mana the most quickly and then leverage that mana into actual resources. Right now, it feels like Carr is on the offensive here, playing that Euro first, but Paulo's got a really good play here with Spiral, and he's going to slam that Wilderness Reclamation next turn.
Yeah, Spiral puts in Steam Vents. Land number 4 is there. 5 as well when we get to that. Here is Fabled Passage. And looking at the first of these 2 Wilderness Reclamations, like you said.
Yeah, it doesn't have a ton to do with it right now. It has the option to cycle a Shark Typhoon for X = 2 and make a flyer to just apply some amount of pressure. But that 2/2 is not really what you want to be doing with Shark Typhoon. But he may want to go ahead and do it just so he can start getting Euro online, maybe find some more juice to use with that Wilderness Reclamation that he already has.
Carr's going to fight back, starting with the front side of an Uro of his own. With the land drop for turn, getting up to 6 mana on the table. Could see Thought Distortion before too long. Not clear how much impact that card actually has as we see Paulo cycling that Shark Typhoon.
Yeah, it's not going to be that good right this moment, but next turn, he's almost assuredly going to be casting it, and it's going to rip the entirety of Paulo's resources from him. He's going to be left with basically just mana and Wilderness Reclamation unless he's able to find something really powerful off this opt right here. The thing about Thought Distortion not being able to be countered is a pretty big deal, but also it just trumps like a medium-sized expansion explosion because you have to cast it before the Thought Distortion, and then just everything disappears.
Paulo picked up a 3rd copy of Reclamation off the top. He's going to start with Opt before committing any. Plays the 2nd copy. Notably, the Uro in hand dodges Thought Distortion, but that's kind of trivial. That's not very important.
Well, it does exile the entire graveyard too, right? So it doesn't like snag everything, but it gets most everything.
A 2nd Reclamation is going to untap these lands. There is a Castle Vantress there and a couple other blue sources, so Paulo can do some work there. Also has picked up Growth Spiral. No land to put in currently. He's going to cast that. Find Steam Vents.
Yeah, now he's going to use that extra mana just to use Castle Vantress and kind of set up his next turn. I guess he just has the mana anyway, so might as well wait.
Carr's going to shock in a Watery Grave.
Oh man, that was a lucky pickup. That 2nd black wasn't at his disposal last turn. I didn't even realize, so... Pretty nice pickup.
That's the 2nd black for Thought Distortion and a Casualties of War. A couple options there. I guess a 2-card hand. Do you want a Distortion or just fire off the Casualties? He's thinking Casualties.
Yeah, he's thinking Casualties. Picking off the Shark makes it so that you don't really have that much pressure on you. You get to take out one of the Reclamations and the Castle Vantress, which is going to scry and be a pretty significant effect. Yeah, I don't know. It seems okay.
Yeah, landed on the Distortion, got that 3rd Reclamation out of there, got that graveyard out of there. Not much else to do with the turn. Paulo will use the opportunity to scry before we go back his way. See a Scorching Dragonfire and a Growth Spiral put to the bottom.
Paulo here set a stop on his draw step. He's thinking about scrying too.
Yeah, a lot of the deck does play at instant speed. You can't really get up to enough cards to make Uro come back this turn with an empty graveyard, so that does make some sense. decides against it. He's going to play the Uro. Picked up a Ketria Triome. He will put that on the battlefield. And Expansion Explosion with 2 active Reclamations. That is a really nice pickup.
Yeah, no kidding. And this is really where the deck starts to become a nightmare for anyone trying to play fair. The moment they hit an Expansion Explosion, when they already have Reclamation out, they just get to do so much damage and draw so many cards. I mean, we see this Expansion Explosion was tried to do for 17. I think they're a little short of that. That seemed pretty high. It's closer to
that was a 13. Large number, and you landed on it so quickly. I was like, wow. But I was like, 13 ain't bad.
This dude's a math genius over here. But
and just goes for the full amount, which was 13. Carr down to 7. Paulo now going to discard some lands. But plenty of heat left over in the hand. Some more copies of Expansion. Looks like 2 of them. Another Uro, another Shark Typhoon. Really big swing in Paulo's favor there.
Yeah, I mean, this completely changed the texture of the game. I mean, we went, like, last turn, Paulo basically had nothing except a Uro and, like, no graveyard to bring it back. The Wilderness Reclamations, though, just represent so much mana that the first big spell you cast just lets you go off. And now we went from nothing to basically the perfect 7-card hand outside of, like, an Errant Breeding Pool.
Yeah, and you do need to hit things in a certain order. It's not great if you just start with Reclamation in hand, but as soon as you hit that expansion, it just explodes you into the game. You see Casualties of War takes care of a Reclamation, but the damage might already be done here. So you see another land played for Rosa. That's land number 7.
Yeah, I feel like Paulo's going to just play this Expansion Explosion for Xaxes. Not going to do too much overkill. That way he can play around Mystical Dispute. Has the expansion, which he could have played to copy a Mystical Dispute because there's only the 1 mana left over from Carr. And even though Carr had that huge distortion, didn't do enough.
An impressive win for the World Championship champion here as we go to sideboards.
Yeah, and it looks like par for the course, Paulo going to be taking out a bunch of his spot removal. I think like Scorching Dragonfire, things like that can go out. Mystical Dispute, there's a couple hits, but it looks like Paulo is going to put those on the bench and kind of just replace them with negates.
Yeah, imagine when you're playing face up against Thought Distortion, you know that you can't always pick your spots with Mystical Dispute, and then becomes a little bit more of a liability.
No, and you see Paulo actually has the full 4 Nightpack Ambusher, so he's going to try to transition more to a tempo game plan. Alongside Brazen Borrower, Shark Typhoon, and Nightpack Ambusher, he's able to hopefully generate some pressure on the battlefield, and maybe his opponent George Carr actually ends up siding out some of those spot removal spells, and then maybe a single Nightpack Ambusher with a little bit of help can get the job done by itself.
And Carr, aware of this Nightpack Ambusher plan around Thought Distortion, thought about boarding one out, is thinking about playing both of them now, but understands that maybe it's not where he wants to be all the time. A lot to consider in sideboarding on this side. Casualties of War fluctuating in numbers as well because it costs 6.
Yep. I think the thing is George Carr has played against this matchup a lot. Almost every single pilot of the deck has 2 to 4 Nightpack Ambusher, and alongside the Shark Typhoon can really do a number on you if you don't have the right tools at your disposal. If you're too reactive, too focused on hitting the hand or the graveyard, sometimes you just get run over on the battlefield.
A Nightpack Ambusher really aptly named the first time you run into it. Now we know about it. Now it's open deck lists, so it's a little bit less of an ambush, but it's still a really tricky card to play around, even when it is face up.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's like a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation. If you cast nothing, they get to play Ambusher. If you don't attack, then they're not taking any damage. And if you don't know whether or not they have it, like sometimes the threat of it is almost as powerful as the thing itself,
Carr down a game gets to be on the play here once again. I imagine Growth Spiral and Uro are kind of the most important things you're looking for in an opening hand on both sides.
Yeah, Growth Spiral is a huge deal. Having that early mana ramp effect can really put you far ahead in the game. If both players have it, though, then we'll probably see a really interesting back and forth. And it's going to be up to like who continues to hit their land drops. But with both players playing just an absurd amount of lands, 27 to 30 most of the time in these decks, that doesn't happen too often.
You do not often miss. Carr opening up on Growth Spiral, has some Uros in hand. Paulo answering with Growth Spiral of his own. No sign of a player missing a land drop just yet. And Carr relevantly picks up number 5 as he's going to work with that Uro.
I remember right when they previewed Growth Spiral, Jerry Thompson said, please, for the love of everything, do not put Growth Spiral in your deck unless you're playing at least 27 lands. And boy, he just predicted the entire future of Standard.
Oh, yeah. And we've seen other decks that play Arboreal Grazer. We've seen as much as 29 lands, just really valuing the additional mana. And more mana, more cards, more wins. That's the simple equation.
Yeah, I mean, when cards generate so many virtual cards just by existing or whatever, it becomes a lot easier to understand why you play so many lands. That was one expansion explosion draws you so many. Cards like Shark Typhoon can represent 2-3 cards at a time. Euro the same way, and becomes way more about mana generation than it does about card advantage when the battles really happen.
We see Paulo pick up land number 4. It plays that. Had a Wilderness Reclamation, instead is just leaving up mana for Nightpack Ambusher and getting rewarded for it as he Carr cycle and answer a Wilt to a Reclamation.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, here comes a Thought Distortion. That's going to leave Paulo without a whole lot. He's basically just going to be all in on this Nightpack Ambusher hand.
Yeah, a lot of stuff hitting the bin here. We see a Reclamation, a Typhoon, an Expansion, and an Opt, and now we don't see any of them. We see 2 Nightpack Ambushers.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot better this game. It only snagged 1 card out of hand last game. Now, that Negate was an outrageous pickup. Now, depending on what happens here from George, the Negate could be a backbreaker, but that second Nightpack Ambusher might be able to give Paulo enough pressure to steal this game. But with Euro and Hydrocrisis threatening so much life gain and Paulo just not really having an answer to any of that, this game might already be over.
The Carr escaping Uro. That is scary stuff. Paulo's going to flash in the second Ambusher. Has a Wolf token, probably making 2 more on his turn. You don't see any answers to that on Carr's side, but as you mentioned, we do see a lot of potential power on the way back for Carr.
Yeah, I mean, he's making 2 4/4s a turn effectively, and he can literally just put 3 wolves in front of the Euro when it attacks, and that seems like it's pretty good. And that's only if he really wants to.
And these Nightpack Ambushers, they pump each other. The tokens get an extra pump, so there's a lot of power here. We see Carr prioritizing getting a flyer out there, cycles Shark Typhoon for a 2/2. Yeah, has picked up a Hydroid Krasis. This is going to be huge.
Yeah, and he knew he was going to be casting Krasis this turn, which is why he went ahead and cycled that Shark Typhoon for 2, because it's likely that he's going to be drawn to something big to do next turn, whether that's another Krasis or another Shark Typhoon or whatever. He knew that 4 mana was going to rot and likely going to go unused if he didn't use it then.
X equals 7. That draws 3 cards. One of them is a replacement Shark Typhoon. To the extent that Shark Typhoon needed a replacement, it did cycle in the first place. A really good position for Carr.
Yeah, so we're going to be using the Castle of Vantress here, and looks like Paulo's going to go for that Shark Typhoon because it's not technically casting a spell. He's going to continue making wolves, and he's going to generate a 3/3 to eat the 2/2 from the other side.
Scry to Shark Typhoon on top, made some tokens, no attacks for Paulo. We go back to Carr, who has now picked up another Hydroid Krasis.
Yeah, this is looking really nice for Carr, but Paulo's getting a lot of wolf pressure here. It may not seem like he's ahead, but if there is a bad attack from George Carr, it could really just change things in a very significant way. Now, if I'm Carr, I might go for the safer play and just go Thought Distortion into Ether Gust here to just pop one of the wolves and contain that generation, and then maybe that even will let you attack with the Euro.
Yeah, there's some ways to try to lay up for lethal damage in 2 turns with the flyers being as large as they are. A big concern with that is going to be the Shark Typhoon that Paulo had. Carr could have played Thought Distortion pre-combat to get the information, but it costs 6 mana. Decides against that, attacks with Uro and Hydroid Krasis, leaving the Shark at home. We'll see what Paulo has to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is you could probably just put all the wolves in front of the Euro and be fine with it. If Carr goes for a Gust on one of the Night Packs to be able to trade for some more wolves or whatever, but it looks like Paulo is just going to take the damage. He's going to go for cycling a Shark Typhoon, and then he's going to go for a Slam attack next turn and try to go for lethal.
Yeah, 13 still less than 16. Paulo goes to 3. What else you got?
Yeah, I mean, if that's a lot of damage coming across from the bottom. Those Night Pack
Ambusher. The big thing
rules.
is just that there are potential flyers that are lethal in 2 turns, right? Paulo's not blocking his way to victory.
Right, exactly. See what Carr decides on here. Go for a Euro to pad his life total a little bit. And that might actually just be enough. Can just cast Krasis for a small amount to put him over the hump, and then still has Ether Gust at his disposal. So if Paulo does go for the Shark Typhoon, it's going to be a disaster.
Carr goes to 25 off of that row. Currently see 30 power in Night Pack Ambusher and Wolf tokens for Paulo. But 2 blockers would do the trick.
Yeah, 2 blockers and just go into 26 life. Because right now, if there's 1 block on a Night Pack Ambusher, it's still 25 damage if it's just 1 block. But if it's 2 blocks with an Ether Gust, it's going to require a removal spell and a negate. But now with going to 26 on the Krasis, I think it's actually just more than enough. Just barely.
Yeah, Krasis pushes the life total just a little bit further out of reach, leaves up 2 mana for Ether Gust. Paulo doubling, triple checking the math, looking at cycling that Shark Typhoon. Now he's got to be aware of what this 2 mana means. He has a negate in hand.
This might be Mad Genius mode. Cycle Shark Typhoon for 2, leave open a Mystical Dispute bluff. Maybe he lets him untap with a negate and doesn't go for the Gust immediately.
You see him looking at 2 or now 1, weighing all the options. How can Paulo win this game?
And that's what really separates the best in the world from people like me, honestly. Like, there's no way I would cycle this for anything less than 3. And because the negate has been rotting basically the whole game, you're so far behind that you kind of just have to hope. But Paulo figured out a way to bluff with that negate. Oh, man, the bluff is ruined.
Yeah, he cycled for 2, but then cast the opt that he drew.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure this Gust is going to be cast now. That might have been a mistake. He let him untap with the negate. And there's a Brazen Borrower.
As on tap, Brazen Borrower, that Petty Theft can clear a blocker. Negate should be good now that Paulo has untapped.
Oh my, what a misstep from George Carr. I think that's lethal. He bounces the token, and he swings in a chump block on the 5/5. He's taking 27 damage. This is game. Paulo found a way to win because George Carr just didn't cast his Ether Gust at the right time. He's getting absolutely punished here.
Yeah, 1 more life was good against the Wolves, but how about a Shark? That 2 extra damage, just removal of the blocker? I believe that Paulo's done it. You see Petty Theft on the Shark.
Wow, brutal. Paulo just squeezing a victory here from the jaws of defeat. It's going to go 3-0 here after this outrageous victory.
Here comes the team. You can try a Gust. That negate is at the ready. That peel right after the Thought Distortion, finally paying dividends.
Yeah, and George Carr's like sheepishly playing this Ether Gust. He just knows he's dead. He just knows. Yeah. Oh, man, that is brutal.
This is what I had. An emphasis on the past tense there. Had. You can't take it with you. This game is over.
There were so many. So it's not that George Carr necessarily made a huge mistake. He made a judgment call to go to 26, which was just shy. He needed Paulo to not have literally like a removal spell and a counter spell. And he also needed